Currently, the trade balance is in favor of China. Do you think we have capacity, or we have that capacity as a continent, particularly our leaders, to be brave enough to address this problem of trade imbalance?
It must be addressed, and I know that there are a number of African leaders who are already beginning to say that that is critical. I've heard President Paul Kagame say that, President Akufo-Addo is saying that, President John Pombe Magufuli, and I think even President Cyril Ramaphosa, and quite a number of leaders whom I'll not name, who are saying that if we are going to engage with China in a manner that is sustainable and for the benefit of the people of Africa, we must ensure that we reduce the trade imbalance. And that requires certain actions on the part of African countries. Let's look at the minerals that we are exporting, like coltan or rare earth, that is being exported to China and is an integral component in electronic material. Why can't we have those factories located in Africa so that Africa also develops our own industries? Why can't we ensure that there is transfer of technology, particularly when we are beginning to talk about the fourth industrial revolution? Is there genuine and legitimate transfer of technology? Why are we allowing unnecessary Chinese labor to be working in infrastructure projects while we have our own engineers and our own people who can do that? Once again, I must reiterate, that is incumbent upon political leadership and leadership in business and leadership in private sector and in public sector to make demands of our leaders that if this kind of relationship goes on unchecked, then China will begin to control our economies in a negative way.
You spoke about the Industrial Revolution, but as a continent, do we have the capacity and the skills?
We do have the skills. I believe that Africa does have manpower. If you look at countries such as Nigeria, or even South Africa, or even Kenya and Tanzania, and if you go up north in Egypt and Morocco, we now have trained personnel. We are beginning to recognize that in order to develop industrially, you need energy. And I've seen mega energy projects in Ethiopia. I've seen major projects in Egypt and in Morocco. We need to see more, for example, in the Democratic Republic of Congo through the Inga Dam, and even down here in South Africa. If you have energy, then you can begin to talk about industrialization. But if you don't have energy, and progressively, another important thing that we are going to require is water. Once you have that and you have infrastructure so that there is movement of goods and services, and you also have the legal infrastructure, then we can begin to talk about meaningful industrial revolution. But this must be done, in my view, initially through regions, so that within SADC, I believe that South Africa is the anchor economy. And once you have that, you go to West Africa, you have Nigeria and Ghana as the anchor economy. One can also talk about Senegal and Cote d'Ivoire to a certain extent. You come to East Africa, you talk about Kenya and, of course, Tanzania as anchor economies. You go to the Horn, you talk about Ethiopia as the anchor economy. In the Central Africa, you talk about a revived Democratic Republic of Congo as an anchor economy. Once we move regionally in that way, then you'll begin to discover that you can begin to talk about continental movement. And the other thing is, through the regional bodies, and there are many of them, you know, the SADC, the ECOWAS, the COMESA, the IGAD, the East African Community, the Central Africa, is the movement towards a single currency. And I've seen recently in Kigali, we talked about freeing the African skies so that intra-African travel is made affordable. And the other thing that I think was articulated very well by President Cyril Ramaphosa is the movement towards a single African currency, so that in the next 50 years or sooner than that, we are able to denominate our products on a currency that is African. We may call it the euro to compete with the yuan, to compete with the dollar, and to compete with other currencies, our own Afro currency. If you have all these factors conjoined, then we will be talking about an Africa that can compete in the international arena.